people always talk about the invisible labor, like the emotional labor. It helps with that. I mean, I really can't imagine trying to run a business without having those automations in place.
Being a business owner is hard. So is being a parent. So why don't we hear more about how to do both of those things well? Fret not, that's why I brought on Kim Caloca-Madden. We dive deep into why business owners with kids should build systems and how automation can be a game changer for busy parents. And of course, Kim and I go deep on nerdy automation talk that is sure to benefit you by giving you lots of ideas for things you can offload in your business. And if you want to get a bunch of those automations for free, you can head over to streamlined.fm/freebie to get my free automation database. But for now, let's get into the intro and then the interview. Welcome to the Streamlined Solopreneur, a show for busy solopreneurs to help you improve your systems and processes so you can build a business while spending your time the way you want. I know you're busy, so let's get started. All right, I'm here with Kim Caloca-Madden. Kim is an online business manager. I just asked you if you did online. We talked about online business management and then I internalized that title, but
Right.
You help people run their businesses online.
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Kim, thanks so much for being here. I'm really excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I'll just say right off the bat here that Kim and I are going to talk, we're probably going to get pretty nerdy. We're going to talk about systems and process automation for your business. Kim did an interview where I heard her on the Automators podcast, which I will link in the show notes, which you can also find over at streamlined.fm/441, where she talks more about home automation. And so if that's your jam, this will be a really good 1-2 punch with that. But Kim, let's start at the beginning. You are a business owner and a mom. Tell us a little bit about your business first.
So I got into my business because I was a stay-at-home mom and I was getting divorced. So I had a 3-year-old and I didn't want to put him in daycare. So I started to just Google things. Like I was Googling different ways to make money working from home. And I found this thing called being a virtual assistant. And, kind of at the time, what I thought of it as was being a freelance administrative assistant. And so I put myself out there, went on sites like, I don't even think it exists anymore. It turned into Upwork. I think it was Elance was at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So I got like my first, I put out some bids on jobs and got those and reached out to some people who I thought I could help. And I became a virtual assistant working around my little one's schedule. When he was at his dad's or when he was asleep, I would work basically, and grew my business over the years into now I'm an online business manager, which is like I have a couple of virtual assistants on my team and I help some clients of mine who have, online businesses in different fields. I help them manage all of the things to make their business run smoothly and help their customers get what they need. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, something I talk about a lot that we're not going to get into really deeply is the delegation part. So I love that you said that you also have some virtual assistants, right? I think just by like virtue of having a business, there are some things you automate, but some things like an actual person has to do, right?
Yeah. That's always the struggle, is finding that razor's edge of how much to automate and how much a person actually just has to do. That's going to make it make the most sense and not create an automated Frankenstein kind of thing.
Yes. Is there like a litmus test you use for that? Because I have like an if this then that statement in my head for what I'll automate and what I'll delegate.
I don't have that. I kind of I'm one of those people where I'm very, right-brained, where I'm very like systems thinking, like Excel spreadsheets, but I've got the left brain. I might be saying those backwards. I always get it confused, where I'm like very creative and I'm neurodivergent. So I'm a little bit like squirrely, like I want to follow things. So I keep it a little bit more nebulous and loose. But what I do have systematized is like there's certain tasks that have to happen. And so I automate sort of our task creation so that every team member has different tasks that just have to be done on a regular basis. And those are set up. And then there's some automations that run monthly to set up, okay, here's a task template, like a project of all of these tasks have to get done. And I'm sort of always iterating. It's always like, to me, it's never so cut and dry of should I automate this or shouldn't I? It's how much can I automate this and how much has to be done by a person. I think I pretty much lean towards automating as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, I mean, you mentioned I have a good process in place for the podcast flow, and I basically automate that right up until the moment I can't, right? Like my editor gets an email with the files in Dropbox when I move files into Dropbox. And then when he puts the edited version back into Dropbox, my VA gets an email for her to schedule it, right? Because that's not something I could reasonably, I would say, automate. I could figure it out and I could put together like a text file. But like at some point, a person needs to look at it and make sure it's okay. Yeah.
Yes. Human eyes need to be on things sometimes, I found. Sometimes the hard way I've learned that lesson.
I like that. Human eyes need to be on it sometimes. So your reason for finding work and my reason for starting my own business were really similar. Like my wife's a nurse, but I wanted to have this kind of flexibility so that even if I was working full time, we didn't necessarily need to put our kids in full-time daycare and things like that. I think I sold myself a story when my oldest is 7. I think I sold myself a story when I went out on my own that was like, oh, it'll be great. She'll just like sit in the rocker thing while I work.
Yeah.
So when the rubber met the road, like how hard or easy, I guess, did you find it was balancing your business with being a parent?
At first I would say it was unfairly easy. The most challenge that I had was I kind of basically went into a survival mode because I had no other income. I was a stay-at-home mom. And then when I left the dad, then I had no income. And so I had to get money coming in a hurry. So that was the more challenging piece. My kiddo, he was always happy to be on his iPad or, doing something if I had to work. He was pretty much self-sustained. And my business sort of grew with him. So by the time he was in kindergarten, like when he started school, kindergarten, first grade, I really grew my business more at those times when he was in school 5-6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then I got remarried and had another kid. And that baby was not content to sit in the bouncer. Like he's the baby who's all over the place, and he was crawling on things and getting into things. And so, my husband was staying home and I was still trying to work. We were trying to figure out this balance of how we're going to handle this new addition to our family. So, and that one he's 6 now. So, he's doing more things on his own, and we've gotten sort of the rhythm figured out. But yeah, adding that second one to the mix was what really tipped it over into difficult, but it's still been fun. I see it. I tell my husband, he gets so stressed out sometimes, and I'm like, it's a puzzle. Like, it's just a puzzle that we get to solve. We don't have to stress about it. We can just try to figure it out. So.
Yeah. Now, does your husband, does he work for himself as well? Or is he doing like a stay-at-home thing or?
Yeah, well, he has a job. He doesn't work for himself. He does have a job, but it's very, very flexible. And it's close to home, so it's only like a few minutes from the house. So when he does go into the office, it's not like he's got a big commute. And they let him work from home a lot. And it's like right now we have a shed. It's a 200 square foot shed. So I've got my desk out here with 3 monitors, and he's got a desk over there. So a lot of times we're working from home together. So That's taken
Nice.
some getting used to, because I was used to having the whole space to myself. But
Yeah. That's not well. At least as long as my wife stays in the same line of work she's in, which she's going to go back to school. So I assume she wants to do this. She's a nurse. I don't foresee that I'll have that problem of her
No.
working from home.
No, I don't think so.
If she is, I'll have bigger problems, I guess.
Yeah.
So 6. So you kind of went through the pandemic as well with 2 kids and trying to do the homeschool thing.
Yep. Oh, yeah, we had a Zoom birthday party for my 6-year-old's second birthday, because he turned 2. So we had a little video chat with friends and family for his birthday party. That was wild. And having them both home, having the 2-year-old at home and my then 10-year-old, that was another layer.
Yeah, I started the pandemic with 1, and by the end we had 3. So
oh, okay. So you guys took the meme seriously.
Yeah, incrementally harder. But I mean, so this is, but this is, I'm not just bringing up past trauma for both of us for no reason.
Right.
That's really, I've been automating for a long time. I have my master's in software engineering, but it was during the pandemic, because my wife was going to work and I was mostly doing the stay-at-home dad thing while still running a business, that I really started to get into, okay, how much can I really automate? So I'm curious, was there a tipping point for you, or is it just something you kind of started to do because you were interested in? What got you into automation?
I think it was a little bit of both, because when I started in the virtual assistant space, there's this software, this email service called Infusionsoft, or Keep, that a lot of people in my little bubble over here use. And it's focused all on automation. It's like their whole big selling point was, we're going to automate your marketing for you. And so that got me thinking, well, what else can I automate? And I would, at the time, my one client, she would have these coaching calls that they would need to be downloaded, and the recordings downloaded and put into a folder. And then the client would have to be notified, like, your call recording is here. And you always want to make sure you get the right recording to the right client, right? So what happened was, there was a couple times where I made a mistake, just human error, And I was like, okay, how can I make sure this doesn't happen again? And that's sort of what was my first foray into automation, was, okay, if I automate this, if I say, only put this file in here if it matches this list of calendar events or something, then I won't be able to make that mistake again. I can keep my client happy, right? So it was a little bit of that. And it was also a little bit of, now at the time I didn't know I had ADHD. I discovered that post-pandemic, like a lot of people, I think. Yeah. But I would get distracted. I would either get interrupted by my child, or I would get distracted by just, a thought, I need to go do this. I get pulled away from my desk, and it's like, where am I? What was I doing? So the automation bit sort of helps me to stay on track. It's like there's a checklist, or there's some trigger that I can see. If I do get pulled away from my desk, I always know how to get back to where I was. It kind of gives me a guardrail or a map.
Yeah, I think those are 2 really important and huge benefits of automation, right? Because I always hear well, what if the automation breaks? Or, how do I know that it'll still feel human? And I'm like, have you ever forgotten to do something for no good reason?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You reminded me.
Computers don't forget.
Right. You reminded me. That was something too, because this client, my very first client that I got, she works with women who are in, let's just call it bad relationships, right? So their spouses are not treating them well, and they're reaching out to her for help. And sometimes, we had an application process because she had a private coaching offer, but we didn't want to waste people's time on a call if they couldn't afford the coaching. So we had this application process, and I automated so that if they answered a certain question on the form, it would wait something like an hour and 13 minutes, something that felt really not automated,
something real.
And then send them a very nice, gentle, here are some free resources since this isn't a good fit for you, right? But something that's not going to make them feel worse. Like, oh, nope, you can't afford it. Because that feeling when you get into something and then it's suddenly like, oh, nope, this is not right for me. So I wanted to give that message kind of gently. And one of my proudest moments was getting a response back to that email that was like, thank you so much for actually taking the time to respond to me, because they felt like it was human, even though it was automated. So I really strive to anything that I do that's automated, especially if it's going to be getting into a client's email or anything like that, I try to make sure that it feels very human, that it doesn't feel like they're getting an automated response or talking to the automated menu on the phone, that kind of thing. And I laughed when you said, what if the automation breaks? No, when the automation breaks.
Yes. When the automation breaks.
You can't just, that's the thing, you can't just hire someone like me to come in and automate a bunch of stuff for you, because it's going to break. Like, you have to sort of either have someone on your team who can help you with it or know how to go in and diagnose the problems.
Yes, absolutely. And luckily tools these days, right? Zapier, make.com, like they're good at reporting when something breaks.
Yeah, for sure.
But testing, I'll tell you my I don't know if it's my biggest automation horror story, but it's certainly the one I think about the most. I use ConvertKit. I don't like the form that they use very much. And so I thought, I'll just use this form in WordPress and use Zapier to send the information from the form to ConvertKit. And I tested it and it worked great. And then I forgot to turn it on. And for a month, I was like, wow, this is really weird. No one's signing up to my mailing list. And I went to check things out. And of course, I wasn't saving the data in locally. I was just sending it right on to ConvertKit. And so now I use a better forms plugin called Gravity Forms for this, where they save the entries and they have a direct integration with ConvertKit.
Yes.
Right? So I think, mistakes like that, where I'm sure you have very similar stories.
Oh, I've so been there.
Yeah, right. I think that maybe the biggest lesson right here, because we don't want to scare people away before we start telling them why they need automations,
right?
Is the fewer links in the chain. The fewest amount of links in the chain, but no fewer, I would say, right?
Yeah. So. And I totally agree with that. And you can start with one piece. You don't need to try to automate your entire business. You can automate one thing that drives you crazy and do it in a small and manageable way. And then you can always build from there. You can always add on another layer.
Yes, absolutely. I always say automation is iterative, right? Like the Rube Goldberg machine I've built that manages my scheduling links was not something I built right out the box, right?
Yeah.
I built one and then another, and I was like, I have a bunch of these Calendly automations. Maybe I can combine them into one. So it's like definitely you want to iterate. Okay, so let's level set for the listeners here. There's, I would say, lots of different types of automation, right? There's automatic bill pay, you could say, is automation. You describe a lot of home automations, again, on that episode of The Automators, where it's like, walk in and lights turn on, or, you outline a very good one that I'm going to clock for when I have teenagers to let them know that hey, they have to come downstairs. But I would say systems and business automation is a little bit different. So how would you, if someone came to you and they said how about I'll put it this way? What would a potential client say to you to make you say you need to automate parts of your business?
I mean, there's so many different ways that you can do this. So number one, business automation is, let's say that you have an online business like my clients do, and people give you money because they want something you have, right? So the business automation is what delivers the thing that you're giving to them, so that you're not sitting there every time somebody wants to pay you saying, okay, you paid me. Now I have work to do to go and like send you a login and create a link for you and give you a document, right? So the business automation is what allows you to take people's money that they want to give to you willingly. You're not, taking it from them in a mugging or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then you're giving them something in return for that. So business automation delivers that. I have another client, a project that I've just started with someone who's a lawyer, and she has, people come and they fill out an intake form for her, and she's got to help them. It's dealing with estate planning and that kind of stuff. So sometimes it's things that people don't really love to face, that, the idea that they need to have this plan in place. So a lot of times she gets people who fill out the form and they're not actually ready to move on it yet. So she needs some automation to sort of help organize those people into one bucket, and then people who are actually ready to go. And then she's agreed to do some work with them, but she's got to collect certain pieces of information in order to be able to deliver what she needs. And so I'm helping her build an automation process system that gets people sorted into those things, gives her a list of what she needs to do and her deliverables, gets their information organized in such a way that she can easily find it, when she's between her two kids and doing all the things, that she can come back and say, okay, here's where I left off. Here's what I need to do for this client. This has a deadline. This needs to go here. So business automation it's anything.
Yeah, which is great, right? Because I think like people hear automation and they immediately think like, oh, I have to build this complex system or I have to know how to write code. But it's really like the most basic way I put it is like you're having a robot or a computer do something so you don't have to.
Exactly.
Right? So like whether it's delivering an online course because it would be wild for either you to just sit at your computer and create logins all day, or make somebody who bought your course while you were sleeping to wait until you wake up to get access to it, right? But it could also be automatic bill pay or setting up a series of emails when someone fills out a form, right? Putting them through this kind of CRM-like pipeline. Or it could be all the way up to like these daisy chained set of events that kick off because, someone filled out a form or bought a thing or a file got added to Dropbox or whatever, like whatever you can imagine. It can be as simple or as complex as you'd like.
Yep. And it can always be, I find that it can always be as hybrid as you like. Like, for example, I had one client who they had a high-end program, and we wanted an application process, and we didn't just want to accept anyone into the program. We wanted to make sure that they had some criteria that they met. So I had an automation that would send an email to the salesperson, and she would either approve or deny the application after reviewing it. And then if she approved it, it went into one automated sequence, and if she denied it, it sent it down another trail. And again, making this all feel very human, right? There is a human that's making the decision. It's not just being automated based on, well, you said B on your application, so that means you go here. Because it was a little bit more nuanced than that. So you can always create an automated system that has as much or as little input from you as you want.
Yeah, this is a really great point, right? Because I do something similar with my coaching form, right? There's couple of answers I look for, and then based on the answers they give, they are either redirected to a scheduling link or to a page that's like, hey, I recorded a video for both, right? That's like, hey, thanks so much for filling out the form. I think your best bet would be to check out these free resources below. Either one, though, anybody who fills out that form gets added to my CRM in Notion. And depending on the answer, the follow-up time is either 3 days or a month, right? Or, whatever, to check in on them and say, hey, have you been enjoying these resources? Is there anything I can do? Because they're just at a different stage of their business. And I want to nurture that relationship. But I know those things because of the automations I put in place.
Right. You were describing that process, and it reminds me of another thing that I've automated that I actually sometimes daydream about building a whole business just based around this piece.
Mm-hmm.
So my clients send out a lot of marketing emails, and like we do, one of them is she's a very launch cycle business. So there's like 4 launches a year.
Oh, yeah.
We send out, 30 to 50 emails during that launch cycle. So I have a process where I put there's a set of tasks for each email in the document, right? So I have a document with, let's say, 50 emails. Each email has to be loaded into our CRM so I can send the email. Then it has to be scheduled before it needs to go out, right? So that it doesn't go out late and we're not constantly running behind. And then it needs to be tracked. So like the metrics need to be tracked of how many people opened it, how many clicks, that kind of thing. Sometimes there's a resend with a different subject line, not for every email, but sometimes we do like a resend to unopens. So I have an automation where I put these into Airtable. So like I put in each email, I say this is the date it needs to be loaded by. This is the date it needs to be sent. If it's resend, here's the resend. And then it creates an Asana task for each email that has the subtasks so that my team member who loads can load it. I schedule it. My other team member reports the metrics. And those also get put onto a calendar. So like I can see the big picture email calendar. And then I can see, oh, look, we have these 4 emails going out at the same time. I need to adjust this schedule a bit. So, but that is, for example, that's one thing, one business automation that I feel almost anybody who ever sends emails to market for their business could use an automation system in place for that.
Absolutely. And like the thing I love about Airtable, I moved all of my operations to Notion because it was like easier for me with my VA, I felt. And I help a lot of people with their automations, and most people are more comfortable in Notion than Airtable. But man, there are days that I miss Airtable. And like one of the things I miss is the fact that you can subscribe to like an iCal version of a table based on dates. And it's just like that, and their Notion's automations like might as well not even exist.
Right.
Like, but Airtable's automations, so good.
Yeah. They are good, but I still find myself very minimally relying on Airtable's native automations. And there's usually a zap that triggers based on, so like a Zapier automation that triggers based on when a record enters a view or when something happens with a record, then do this. But yeah, I would see what I would do with, if that's a feature that you're missing from Airtable, I would have that Notion. I would set up a Zap that runs information from that Notion over into an Airtable just to get that calendar view. Or actually, I would probably put it onto a Google Calendar. I would say if there's a record in Notion that has this, then put it on the Google Calendar. That way you don't have to do the Airtable to iCal thing. But
yeah, that's like I was doing something because I was using the app Craft for a while, the note-taking app Craft.
Yeah.
And something that I feel it does especially well is like the event-based notes. So like you can connect your calendar and then you can create a note based on the event.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really neat feature. And I thought, I could do this in Notion, right? Just like set up a Zap to or a make automation or whatever. Whenever something gets added to my calendar, create a note in Notion, right? And it was just like, there's a point where it's just easier to do it manually because like I have a million calendars and like I don't want notes for all of them.
Right.
And I'm just like, this is dumb. It would be easier for me to set up like a keyboard maestro script to like, when I open Zoom, just open a blank note in Notion or Obsidian or whatever. Whatever I happen to be using that day, right?
Yep.
So, okay, cool. You accurately predicted we'd get into a rabbit hole here. Hopefully we gave the listeners some good ideas. But this is such a crucial question, I think. Why do you believe automation is important for solopreneurs, especially when they're busy parents?
Well, the most important thing, I think, is delivering a consistent experience for your customers. is if you're a solopreneur and if you're a parent and you're in the middle of delivering something manually for someone and your kid needs help and you get come back, right? What the experience that your customer has is going to be different depending on your day and how your kids are doing and what's happening in your house, whether it's COVID or just a busy laundry day.
Big feelings, whatever it could be, right?
Yeah. Big feelings, broken bananas,
Yes.
all the big ones. So I feel that number one, it gives you the ability to deliver a consistent customer experience. Number two, I live and die by my Asana, which is what I use for my task and project management. Literally, if it's not in there, it doesn't get done. I even have some personal things in there, where I check once a month. I have a task that reminds me to check and make sure that I have all of my online bill pays scheduled so that they go out and there's enough money in the right accounts so that can happen. And, automating a to-do list for yourself, I feel really helps. When you're a solopreneur, and a lot of times, especially if you're working from home, it's really hard to get that separation. And one of the things I love about having my shed is I do have a little bit of that because I come out here and this is work and I go in the house and that's home. But I can still sometimes sit on my laptop in the house and end up working. Like the work is always there and it's always in the back of my mind. I'm always wondering, did I miss something? Is this done? Does that need to happen still? And my task list, automating that really gives me that sense, that peace of mind that I can know, okay, I can see what needs to be done. I can see it's done. I can see this can wait until tomorrow. So it really helps, I feel, with people always talk about the invisible labor, like the emotional labor. It helps with that. And it makes it, I mean, I really can't imagine trying to run a business without having those automations in place that really help keep my brain.
Yes. Yeah. And, it's funny you mentioned the invisible labor because later this month, as this episode comes out, there'll be an episode from Lindsay Karnick talking about exactly this thing, right? Thinking about work when you're not at work. And so automations or I stole David Sparks' shutdown routine as a way to reduce that mental load, especially when you're with your kids, especially you have a 6-year-old. So but I've got 7 to 3, right? Or almost 3. So I want to be present with them, right?
Yeah.
I have very little time before they are going to be in school. All of them will be in school full time. So my older 2 are already there. So, you want to make sure that you are present, and automations is a big way that helps.
Absolutely. I find that's really important too, just to help me be, a long time ago, I read Getting Things Done. So I kind of abide by that philosophy that's a David Allen book. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you're familiar with it.
That and the Checklist Manifesto, right?
Right. But the idea that my brain can relax because there's a system that I trust. So my brain knows if it needs to be done, it's in there. And if it's not in there, then you don't have to worry about it. And that really helps me to be a more present and less stressed parent with my kids.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Now I will. So actually, let's get to the practical steps, and then we'll end with a little bit more nerding out.
Okay.
So if someone wants to start automating today, what do you recommend?
Well, I know some people say that Make was an easier system for them to learn. For me, Zapier was a lot easier to learn. I found I had an easier time with Zapier.
I would agree with you there.
Yeah. And I would just say, if you're a parent and you're wanting to get into automation, so for the parenting side, I would say try automating something with your calendar. So let's say whenever a dentist appointment gets added to your calendar, you want to put in, like, send an email to yourself, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of basic. I'm trying to think of some automations, but I would just say, notice.
I think, I have one set up where it's when I add something to, or when my wife adds something to her calendar, it automatically gets added to the family calendar.
Yeah, that's a smart one.
Because that's sometimes, I'm, again, like David Sparks level number of calendars in Fantastical, and like 7 calendar sets to see what I need to see at any given time.
Yeah.
And so, like, sometimes I won't always see what she adds to her calendar, but if the family calendar is always up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, because I feel like the calendar is a constant struggle. Like, there's always something about the calendar with as a parent or as a member of a family.
Yeah, I feel like that's like every family invents, and like calendars are my love language. Like, my wife knows this. Like, if it's not, like you said, if it's not in Asana, it might as well not exist. Like, if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist in my head. Like, it's, and now I'm like, I have 3 kids. Do I need to maintain 6 calendars, one for each of us, and then like a master list? Like, what?
Yep. Well, and because I have my oldest and his dad is elsewhere, I have a calendar that's shared events for him, so like that he can see when there's doctor appointments, dentist appointments, things like that. And then I also have a calendar for my little one, because it's like he's got this homeschool program. He's in a charter school, so we have meetings with his teacher and trying to keep track of like his field trips and things like that. And it's like sometimes dad's taking him, sometimes I'm taking him. So I feel like each entity in your family might need their own calendar. Maybe not each dog. Like, maybe you can just have a family one for the vet appointments. But
yeah, that's amazing. So if you're a parent, something with the calendar, that's great. Like, or something with to-dos, like if you're an iPhone user, right? Like a shared reminders list is a really simple thing.
Yeah.
That you can maybe automate in some way.
A shared reminders list, or even like my husband and I use Spark for email. So this isn't an automation. It's more of a tool, but it's, so I bring all of, I have like at least 10 that I can see. I'm just going off the top of my mind, 10 different email accounts, some of them clients, some of them personal, like that I use for different purposes. And my husband
I just started
and
sweating.
Yeah. Because in Spark, I can share an email with him, and then we can comment and chat down below it about the email. So if I get an email from a teacher, I can share the email with him. We can chat about it underneath in a private conversation outside of that email, and then decide how we want to proceed with it. So I don't have to like forward him emails. We just have the little conversation in there. So I think a lot of times it's not even so much automation that's the thing. It's systems. So what is the system that you need? Like if an email comes in that we both need to talk about, we discuss it in Spark. If a calendar event gets added to to Ethan's calendar, then who's going to be the parent taking him? Then we also add it to our calendar. So it's really, I think, understanding that everything needs a system, and sometimes the system can be automated.
Yeah, this is great. That is an amazing insight, because you're right. Like, I'm not going to go to my wife and be like, "Hey, can you set up a Zapier for this?" Like, that would be insane, and she'd be like, "What?" But like who's taking kid 1 or kid 2 somewhere? Like, I love that, because right now we're just like, do you want to take Teresa to cello practice tonight, or am I going to do it? Right. But if we had a system in place, then there would be no confusion, and there would be no last minute discussion about that.
Yeah. Well, and for me, that eliminates decision fatigue, right? It's like like Steve Jobs always wearing the same outfit. Like, you don't have to decide on that. You have a system in place, so you know who's doing what and when. And it's one less thing as a parent that you have to talk about, because let's face it, we barely get enough time to talk to each other. Do we really want to spend 10 of those minutes talking about who's driving to Hop Keto tonight? Like,
right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh, that's so great. And then if, so that's the parent side of things, right? If you are a parent and a business owner, like, what's maybe what's a system that you can think about in your business to help you be a more present parent or save some time in your day so that you can go pick up the kids from school without stressing?
Yeah, I would say if you don't have any kind of automation or anything going for you right now, I would say start with some kind of task management. So whether you're going to put that into an Airtable or into a Notion or into a tool like Asana, I would just start making a habit of at the beginning of each day, just kind of doing a brain dump of the things that you need to do. And then as you do those things, if you kind of do that for a week or a month, you'll start to see, okay, these are the things that come up again and again. And then you can set those as repeating tasks for yourself so that you don't have to, every time you do a brain dump, think, okay, I need to check this person's customer support inbox, right? Like you just know that's on my recurring tasks. And I don't have to brain dump that out. So then your load kind of gets lighter over time.
Yeah, I love that. And I will preface this next, we'll call it a lightning round, by saying use the tool that works for you.
Yes.
But now I'm going to ask Kim what some of your favorite general tools are, right? You mentioned Asana for task management, right? Mm-hmm. What are you using for your calendar?
My calendar, I use Google Calendar. Fantastical is the app that goes on top of that.
Man, if you had told me like 10 years ago that I'd be paying $60 per year for a calendar app, I'd be like, that's insane. Mm-hmm. But now I'm like, there's no way I'm not paying for Fantastical.
Right. But I do use Acuity for my scheduling. And like, that's what I have most of my clients using for, scheduling coaching calls and things like that. That's another one of my favorite tools. I do use both Airtable and Notion. So I love them both for different purposes. Notion was a steeper learning curve for me. I found Notion harder to understand and use than Airtable.
Agree wholeheartedly. And I think it's because I thought about this for a while. Mm-hmm. It's because Airtable's the database. I mean, like at its core, like you know what it is. Uh-huh. With Notion, I was like, is it a database? Is it a notes app?
Right?
I can't. And then like my friend who's a Notion expert, shout out Kat, was like, well, it's a database of pages. And I'm like, that's not a thing. Like that's not a real thing.
It is now.
Right. Yeah, now it is because Notion made it so. But like that's like, oh yeah, this car has feathers. Like that's like that was the same thing in my head, right?
Yeah.
So what do you use Airtable for versus Notion?
So Airtable, I have like many of my favorite automations are in Airtable. So like I have Airtable set up for every time that one client launches who has the crazy launch cycle, I have an Airtable that has several automations and zaps hooked up to it that when I enter, the emails that need to be loaded and scheduled, those things get pushed out into the various places they need to. And whenever that launch closes, I make a copy of that to archive the information, and then I delete everything in it and use it again so that I don't have to go set up those automations every time.
Nice.
Notion, I have things like SOPs in it. So like the documentation, because I can embed the videos, I can link up to the different pieces. Like I like that page aspect. And I have kind of a client dashboard. So each of my clients, I have a page for each of them that has links to their most relevant SOPs or the tools that they use, sort of as like a team reference point. So it's like a wiki, I guess. My Notion that's the main way that I use Notion. And I've tried to set up some shortcuts and things. Like I have a vision for this ultimate email database that I kind of want to build that I think would have to involve Notion for the rich text formatting and stuff.
Yeah. That's that. I really like that. I also like that, like, I could easily share like a Notion section with another person. Mm-hmm. I know you can give like access to.
Airtable sharing is much more. It's a pain, and people get so confused. Like I send them something. Here's an Airtable share, a link to a share view, and they're like, "Well, how do I do this?" I'm like, "Well, you can't because you can just look at it."
You can't because then I'm going to get dinged. This was, I think, my biggest frustration is that if I wanted to give I was on the paid plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I wanted to give my VA access to like one Airtable base thing, I'd have to pay for like a whole other seat. But if I was on the free plan, I wouldn't have to do that. I'm like, This is weird.
You just reminded me of something that I think is a better answer for starting with practical business automation. And that is a password management service.
Oh,
so
yes.
I use 1Password, and then I have vaults for each of my clients that I share with my team members who need them so that they can log in. I never lose a password. I can log into anything from my phone or from whatever computer that I'm on with my password management. And I feel like that's an underrated piece of automation that people should have, because a lot of times I get to a business owner and they've got passwords scattered all over the place in spreadsheets or documents or written on Post-it notes. And it just makes it harder to delegate and to share that. My Airtable login, I share my Airtable login in 1Password. So we have one user that's on my paid plan, and my team logs in and uses that. But
yeah, that's smart. If I'm going back to Airtable, which this is not breaking news. I'm not saying I am. I'm thinking, I miss it.
Yeah.
But that's definitely the move. I mean, that's what I did for Dropbox, right? My VA has access to my entire Dropbox account, right? So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Okay, and then the last thing I'd ask you about is note taking. Where do you take your notes?
Oh man, I'm a mess with my notes, man. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I use drafts a lot for just if I need to write something down. I loved Evernote for the longest time until it went down, whatever it went down. It's not a good
whatever
thing.
It's down now.
Yeah. So drafts, I have notes in drafts. I have notes in Asana, because Asana, you can really put a lot of text into those. I have notes in Google Docs. I have notes everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. You are. That's Google Docs is never someplace I don't know. It's always a word processor to me. And so I'm like, would you put a note in Microsoft Word? I certainly wouldn't.
But you can search it. You can search it so well.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm like, I have notes in the Notes app. And then I use Obsidian for a lot of notes.
I'm trying to get into Obsidian.
I don't recommend it to a lot of people, but I used to be a web developer. And so like the thing I love about Obsidian is, you mentioned, like do a brain dump of like all the tasks, right? So like something you can do with Obsidian and a plugin called Data View is say like, look for all the tasks across all the notes and just list them all right here.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's really nice. And then there's like a Things 3 integration. Things is my current task manager, though. We're approaching 6 months, so I'll probably be moving to something else soon.
Yeah.
It's usually between like it's always like, oh, I'm not doing it as well as I could be, so I'll move to Todoist. And then I'm like, oh, Todoist is there's too many things going on, so I want something simpler. All dumb. None of it matters. But Obsidian I live in. And so like there's a note that's just like open tasks, and I'll go through like once a week and be like, what did I open up this week that I forgot to close?
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I love Obsidian for that stuff. Cool. Well, this was as good as I thought it would be. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
My website is kimcaloca.com.
All right. I will put that in the show notes, along with all sorts of other stuff we talked about. The Getting Things Done book that Kim mentioned, and the, I don't want to say plethora, but the battery of tools that we threw at you. I'll try to link to most of those in the show notes. You can find them wherever you're listening right now, or over at streamlined.fm/441. Kim, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was totally fun.
And thank you for listening. Thanks to our sponsors. And until next time, I'll see you out there.